session, we will start with one of the really remarkable vertebrates, the frog that you see in front of you. This frog is sitting on the table, and as we focus down on it, I think you will see that he already shows a number of striking attributes. I believe you can see that the animal is breathing. You see the rhythmic movements of the buccal pouch, and further back you can see some thoracic movements. The frog does not, to be sure, breathe like man does. Rather, he takes air into this buccal pouch and forces it down into the lungs, but the neurological control is essentially the same as in the mammals. You will note also that the frog, like all animals, has a particular position, holds a particular position with respect to gravity. Usually that position is one that prepares the animal for future activity. And you see this animal did in fact start to walk, and here it jumped, and now it's jumped clear off, but we'll get it back. But you see, once we get the frog controlled again, that's the frog complaining there, croaking. And get him down there. This way. That the frog's position that you now see of extension of the forelimbs and flexion of the hind limbs is just that position that permits it either to leap suddenly forward or to move forward by step-like progression. So this animal adopts a certain position that is characteristic of every animal. It is different according to the species, but is adapted to the way of life of this animal. Now, if we look at the first slide, we will see some of the elements that go into the making of what we would call posture. By posture we mean this particular position with respect to space that permits the animal then to go on and do the things that he wants to do. First of these is the ability to stand, to maintain, in this case, an erect posture with respect to gravity. 2 is the ability to maintain equilibrium. That is to say, to keep in balance despite shifts in the platform. And finally, number 4, to regain the upright posture if thrown off balance. Let us now look at the frog again and see if we can detect these attributes. Standing, you see the extended position of the front legs, the flexor position of the hind legs, is not a pure passive one. It is maintained by muscular contraction of appropriate muscles which holds the limbs in those particular positions. Here then is posture. Here then is standing. As to the next one, which is equilibrium, this is the ability to maintain balance despite changes in the platform. let us see, by carefully turning the frog to the right position. Now I'll tip the platform forward, and notice how the head comes up. I'll tip the platform down. See how the head comes down close to the table? Tip him up. See how the head comes up and down as the position of the platform changes. The net result of this, of course, is that the head stays in the same position. Okay? Now, all of you who've gone to any of the border towns and have seen the people carrying home chickens or ducks or little cabritos, they might hold the animal in their shopping bag or under their arm, but usually the head is maintained in the right position in space. This is the first part of equilibrium, the ability to maintain the head and in time the whole body, because if I tip this forward, you'll see that not only does the head come up, but the four limbs extend. So it isn't just a neck response, but is a total body response. Now these responses are effected by means of otolith organs in the inner ear. These are gravity sensing organs, little grains of bone set in sensory hairs, so that when the position of the animal is changed, it becomes aware of it and proper measures are taken. Now let us turn this animal so that it faces you, if I can get it turned properly toward the camera. Let's see if the camera can come down more on top. But maybe it... Oh, here's the camera I'm working with now. Now let us just turn or rotate the animal, and you will note that although I rotate the animal, the head rotates also, so that the animal keeps looking straight ahead. Here then is another aspect of equilibrium, the reaction to rotation, and in this case to acceleration. Now let us see the final point. Let us turn animal completely over, and see how quickly it turns back again. I can hardly really get the animal to stay over at all. As soon as I have him upside down, he turns back. Now, I've slowed the action up a bit because the frog is sitting on a dry paper box and he's sticking now a little bit, and therefore you can sort of see the writing in slow motion. He's also getting a little tired. And perhaps you can hear him complain a bit about it. Now, this animal then, in a small space, shows a great number of the very same mechanisms that you and I show. All of these are common to all vertebrates. The final motor act of locomotion and voluntary activity then is superimposed over this basis. And here too the frog shows a remarkable motor performance. It can, for instance, catch flies with its tongue, which certainly few of you could do, but certainly also man shows a tremendous advance in motor control, and particular in control of the hand and the mouth. The mouth, because man has a more specialized vocal system. He talks, in other words, and he uses his hands for special motor functions. These capacities are very, very lacking in the frog, but you see they are there in potential. Part of the reason they are there only in potential can be seen from the next slide, or the next table. Here we are. Here is a rough schema of a frog's brain, and you see it has very large olfactory lobes in comparison with man. The frog can indeed smell very well. The cerebral hemispheres are minute in comparison with man. The optic lobes in the thalamus are in proportion, and the cerebellum and the medulla are present too. Let us start sectioning this brain, and let us make our first section here, between the optic lobes and thalamus and the cerebral hemisphere, taking away all of the cerebral hemispheres. Now let me say, in anticipation of any queries, that if we took out both cerebral hemispheres in man, man would be totally and permanently paralyzed if it were done in an adult person. This would be true also if it happened in a dog or a cat, but again, in a monkey or a primate, but only if it happened in adults. If a young monkey were decorticated, it could learn to walk and to climb and so on. So perhaps could a young child with severe brain damage. A dog and a cat can walk almost perfectly after total loss of their cerebral hemispheres, and we would be hard put to it to note the difference in their abilities. And in the section after the next one, we will try to show you this. But now let us decerebrate this frog, which we can do by simply cutting off the head between the eyes and the tympanic membrane, which effectively does what I showed you on the board. And I'll substitute a little gauze for its brains. Here we are. Now, can we see our frog? There he is. Let's turn him there. Here he has lost his cerebral hemispheres. You note by the movements that the animal is breathing. This is to be expected because you already know that the respiratory center in vertebrates is in the medulla, so we would expect it to continue breathing. But note too that, minus a little shock, this animal is holding its position, a posture just like it did before. See the extension of the front limbs, see the flexion of the hind limbs. And note that this animal can walk and jump, and indeed did jump away. Let's see if we can pinch his toe, and he did jump way out on the floor, and we'll collect him again. So this animal can still stand, it can walk. Can it right itself? This is getting pretty sticky. Let me wet him down a bit. Now this is saline. If it were a martini, maybe it would help him a little. But here he is, standing. Let's try to tip him over. And you see, perhaps not as briskly, but just about, he rights himself. Turns itself over just about as quickly. And indeed, if we let the animal recover, it would right itself, it would balance, would show its equilibrium just as well as a normal frog. We can therefore say that all of the attributes of posture can be mediated by subcerebral centers, centers lying in the area between the medulla and the cerebral hemispheres, namely in the hypothalamus, the thalamus, the optic lobes. Let us take those out. Let's go back to our same drawing. Here is the section we had made. This frog now has no cerebral hemispheres. Let us take out this next section from here to here. That's no more than about 3 millimeters, and I will destroy them by a pithing needle, and I will hold it in with my fingernails so that only about 4 millimeters here, if we can focus. Here's a little forceps, and I will put my thumb so that it can't. Now I'll put it down here. Alright, there you can see the little shiny tip, just about 4 millimeters. Let me destroy the midbrain then. Alright, now look at our frog. The frog is lying here just as I dropped it. If I put it that way, it stays that way. If I put it that way, it stays that way. In other words, we have lost all the attributes of posture. We have lost the ability to stand, of anti-gravity standing. We have lost the power of balance or of equilibrium. We have lost the power of writing. And all of those then can be located then in the brain stem, from the medulla up to the thalamus. But we must say that this animal is not totally unable to respond. Let us illustrate that simply by hanging it up, hook, and perhaps you can see it hanging with no particular posture. Let me pour out a little acetic acid, 1% acetic acid, which is here. And we'll go down to a foot. And let me dip the toe. Can you come in a little closer here? Fine. Here are the 2 feet. They're sort of stuck together. And there are the 2 long toes. And here's the little beaker of acid. Let me dip the toes in the acid and see what happens. The toes dipped in the acid, which isn't very strong, now start to lift themselves up out of harm's way. I can do that by pinching. Okay? This little phenomenon was called by the ancients the sympathy between parts. I wish we could have a little more. Do you have any stronger acid down in your shop? See if you can get some little stronger acid in a hurry. This one is acetic. Yeah, would be fine. Let's just hold on, because this response is not very good yet, and it's not my fault. It's just that I didn't bring in strong enough acid. And you see, this is a response that looks like an avoidance response, a washing off response. It is, therefore, it does express a sort of biological purposiveness or biological value. The ancients, I'm just washing the acid off now, the ancients called this the sympathy between parts, because they said the toe being hurt, it is the muscles of the thigh that lift it up out of harm's way. So this was sympathy between the parts. And when the little rami communicantes were discovered joining one ganglion to another alongside the vertebral chain, it was thought that these were the intercommunications that made this response possible, and hence it was called the sympathetic nervous system. It was quickly discovered that this was not so, and that we owe to remarkable physiologist Stephen Hales, who said that if you do this experiment, cut off the head of an animal, the sympathy was still to be seen. And let me just check again, see if sure is. Now let us do what Hales did. Pith the whole of the spinal cord. Pass the pithing needle down and totally destroy the spinal cord. Now there's little change in the external appearance of this animal, but I think we can be sure, and indeed 1,000 experiments confirm, that from now on this animal shows none of these sympathetic relations. Now if we touch it or pour acid or any of these things, these responses do not occur. Of course, they're not called sympathetic responses anymore. They're reflexes. The idea being that a sensory impulse is reflected back on the motor mechanism. Now this animal is not, for all that, through, and let me show you one experiment that indicates something of the ability of the individual parts. Let us disconnect the hind limbs with a little bit of their nervous connection with the spinal cord. First, by taking off the skin and dissecting the animal rather hurriedly and not at all carefully. The only thing is we generally tend to avoid hurting, letting the skin stay near the muscles and nerves, because there appears to be some poison in the skin. Let us repeat the experiment that Galvani had experimented with about in 1793. He had the idea that there was an electrical behavior in muscle activity. And having heard of Franklin's experiment of drawing electricity from a kite flying in the clouds, thought that by exposing the animal to atmospheric electricity, there might be some changes. So daily he hung frogs on a balcony on a hook, and nothing happened, of course, until one day the wind caused the frog, and which one am I looking at? This one over here? Fine, the one with red. Until the wind blew the frog's legs against the balcony, and then you see that each time this happened and a circuit was made between the balcony and the frog jumped. And this, of course, was the invention not of animal electricity, but this is how people became aware of the electrical potential generated at the junction of dissimilar metals. Because the hook was probably of brass and the balcony was of iron, the best effect is with a junction of zinc and copper, and that's what I've used. So this didn't just discover animal electricity, it discovered current electricity. And what we know happened is that the current flowing between the zinc plate and the copper wire stimulated the nerves and muscles and made the muscles contract. This is perhaps the most famous of all experiments, done more times than any others, and every one of you should see it. Alright. The animal quickly tires. Let us now look, I think, at the next table, and here you see what I have been talking about. Here is the reflex that we talked about. Here is the spinal cord. Here is a sense organ with its nerve fiber, a ganglion, entering the spinal cord via the dorsal roots, internuncial neuron probably, the motor neuron, and the muscle. And then, I haven't mentioned, nor could I demonstrate today, with this simple mechanism, is the presence of a myoneural junction. So here are the parts, looking at them that way. The muscle, the myoneural junction, the motor nerve, the motor neuron, the internuncial neuron, the dorsal root fibers, the whole making a reflex arc and this forming the essential functioning unit. The parts then, for the first time, put together in a whole that performs a useful function. And as you know, reflex behavior is the basic way of controlling not only skeletal muscle, but our visceral organs and many others. So here is a very fundamental point. But the fact that higher centers influence this was shown by our simple experiments here. So it is clear that the reflex arc, which is the beginning of things, must be controlled by higher centers. Today I want to show in man how one of the higher centers controls our motor activity, and perhaps let's just peek ahead. We can take a look at the behavior of this remarkable instrument, the human labyrinth, and inner ear. This combines two functions, of course. Three functions, really. Hearing, which is centered here in the cochlea, and it's beautifully drawn as a little snail, which it is, sending its impulses to the brain via one part of the auditory nerve. Then the second part here is the semicircular canals with the utricle and the saccule. The utricle is the site of the statoliths, of the otoliths that control our response to position. This is why the frog held its head up in the right position. This is the place where the stimuli started when he was upside down, because the little otoliths were getting a different signal than when he was right side up. And many of you know the very interesting story of the experience with crawfish, or crawdads, or crayfish, or whatever you want to call them. They are, as you know, incidentally running now, and this is the time to get your crayfish bisque and the crayfish étouffée and everything. If you're a Cajun, or even if you're plain Texan, you ought to. The crawfish has an external utricle, or sensory pit, in which there are sensory hairs. And when the animal molts, the little otoliths are molted along with the animal, with the shell, and the animal is without power of position until he gets some sand in there by accident. And you know, the biologist who waited for a crawfish to molt in distilled water and then put in stainless steel filings, and these getting into the otolith organ, now the scientist could put a magnet up on top or on the side that had more power than gravity and could get the crawfish to either live upside down or live on one side or any other, because by pulling the iron filings with the magnet, he could delude the animal as to where the power of gravity was. So here is the utricle. The saccule has some otolith organs too, but we simply do not know what it does. This is an area of ignorance. But we do know about these three structures, which are the semicircular canals, which form, you see, organs in a horizontal plane and in two vertical planes at right angles to each other, so that in reality one can detect movement in any plane. Now the next slide, or what do we call this? The next graphic tells us how this is done. This is a semicircular canal from a fish, I think, and it shows that essentially they are the same thing. Here is a nerve to a little swelling called the ampulla. Coming down from the top is a little jelly-like mass, the cupula, which is embedded in sensory hairs. And if the head is suddenly moved, then endolymph either moves in or out depending on the way the head rotates. And as endolymph either moves in or out, and here is the movement depicted by a drop of oil which would show up in microscopy, then the cupula moves against the sensory hairs in an appropriate way, and that signals the presence of movement. And thus we can adapt our position, our motion, and many other things to correct for acceleration. This means angular rotation. Now, it is very hard indeed to show this in man during motion. But do not forget that this endolymph has inertia. So that if we can get the endolymph moving and then suddenly stop the person, the inertia will move the endolymph in a way to indicate motion in just the opposite way. So that if you rotate a person and suddenly stop him, then you would see happening the effects of starting only in the other way. And for that reason, I have asked for some volunteers, and they're going to be our subjects. They have the biggest, tallest, and strongest students have volunteered, and so it's going to be very hard to do anything with them, but that's guaranteeing a guarantee that everything is going to be all right. Now, we will ask our number one person to hold his head down a bit, about like this, so that the horizontal canal is almost perfectly horizontal. Then we will rotate him 10 times at a slow rate to the right. That is, this way. Now when he stops, you see, you can understand that he will feel he is going to the other way. So, and he will correct for what he thinks is motion. Now, the first way that we can illustrate this is by the method of past pointing. Now, will one of our other students come down here and crouch or squat on the floor? About in here, just with your back to us, back to the camera. Turn way around. There. Now, when I stop you, I want you to put your hand right out and put your finger out, just one finger. Now you get back a little farther so you can see that finger. You hold your finger up and touch it. All right. Now you lift and bring it down and touch. Can you do that?
I'll try.
All right. Now close your eyes and do it. Okay. Do a little more fast, a little more rapidly. So keep doing it over and over and over and over. He knows where he is, even with his eyes closed, and can register. All right, now let's pretend you've just been stopped. You put your hand straight out, you grab it so that he'll know for the first time where he is, right? All right. Hand up and out and down, like that. Now keep on repeating it. Do we have the drill set?
Right.
All right. Now, who will help me turn? Let's have two people. Let's turn him to the right quite slowly, about one in a second. You hang on good and tight, head down, eyes closed during the whole thing. 10 times, we stop him on 10, aiming that way. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hand out. Catch it. Now up and down. Up. All right, do you see which way he passed point? Came up and moved in this direction because he thought he was moving in that way and would correct to bring it in. Shall we try that again? Can you do it once more? Now, you have to be a little more brisk about getting your hand out. You have to remember to catch his finger the first time, just so you'll know where it is. Okay, to the right. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Get going. All right. See? Now that time we really did it. Catch him where he is now. Get it.
I have my eyes open.
See how? But see where he finally ended? Way over here, a good 90 degrees away. And you can see that unconsciously he thought he was moving to his left and past pointed to his right. Okay. Now we won't use him again just because that's quite enough, and we'll use our next one. Now this time, will you take off your shoes? Because we want you to walk, and I don't want you to slip. Now I want you to stand up here and protect him. Now, we'll rotate him in the same way, to the right. And we'll stop it, and we'll ask him to get up and walk straight ahead. Now, just close your eyes, and as I ask you to, just get up and walk straight ahead as a 1, 2, 3 steps. No, close. We'll stop you. All right, fine. No problem. His semicircular canals are working fine. He's in perfect equilibrium. Now, can you do it just about that way? About 5 or 6 steps, not too slow, not too fast. And you be there. And why have we put him over here on the right? Because thinking he is turning that way, he will correct his walking, and if everything turns out, he'll walk right over here. Okay, let's try this. Bend your head down a little. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Up and walk straight ahead. Walked in.
Correct result?
Nope, it wasn't, was it?
Well, there's a flaw in the experiment. The bright.
All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Up and off. All right. He was correcting, but if you had watched, he was sticking out his left leg to brace. We can't, I imagine the strong studio lights help him correct. Now let's try the best way if we can show it to you. And that is by the method of nystagmus. 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 If any of you have ever ridden in a train, watch a person next to you as the train goes ahead. You will see their eyes oscillating back and forth. every now and then the eye will flick forward in the direction of the train and then slowly move back till it flicks forward again and slowly moves back. You can see that this is a mechanism to keep the eye fixed on a distant scene despite movement. So let us think of our person again, who when he stops thinks he's moving toward his left. His eye will slowly move to the right and flick forward to the left. Move slowly to the right, flick forward to the... So the fast component will be in the direction of movement, suspected or real, and the slow component against it. Again, the idea is to keep the eyes fixed. Now we'll try this, and we'll try to get the camera right in when we stop. Now we will ask our subject to open his eyes as soon as we're through rotating and look straight ahead, and we'll see if we can see it in the camera. Now, let's bring in the camera and just, you close your eyes. How close to his eyes can you come? We're safe enough because we can rotate. Now go look at the camera. Okay, good, steady eyes. No. He's looking, and you can see that we can get it pretty well. Okay. Shall we try it? We'll try to get you on the camera. Okay. Turn to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Stop. Look at the camera. See? I think by now it's stopped. Not quite. You can see the tiny jerky movements. They're about stopped. Okay, will you try this again? 2, 3, 4 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Excellent, particularly over in the other eye, this eye. And I think, let's see, the slow movement was from this side to this side. All right. Would any of you like to try that and see if we can see it? Once more? You don't have a glass. Let's just try this once more. I think we all saw it that time. I saw it if you didn't. All right, I don't want to overdo our welcome, but thank you all very much. Now, today then we have seen how by attempting to find good animal models by animal dissection and by checking out the activity of man himself, we can put together an idea of how muscular activity is controlled. And I was looking at the wrong camera, and I should have had more sense because the pretty girl is running the one I should have been looked at. That motion is controlled, and you will find not only muscular motion, but this could be a general rule for all nervous control. That nervous control is based on the reflex. a simple reflex at the beginning, and then on what we will call higher control. Now we have seen simple reflexes in the frog, and we have seen how its higher control operates, and we have seen how one of the earliest of higher control mechanisms, semicircular canals, operate in man. Next time we will look more closely into the matter of standing. Thank you.